Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Courtside View Webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune basketball beat writer Steve Walentik. Steve, Missouri coming off a loss at home, the first of the season to Kansas State. Kansas State has now beaten Missouri twice, and Missouri has only lost 3 times all year. Kansas State, not a bad team, but not a great team. What do they know about beating Missouri that no one else seems to?
Well, I think everybody knows where the Tigers are vulnerable. It's just the way Kansas State plays exposes those things even more. Kansas State's a physical team. They're as physical a team as there is in the Big 12. They might be the most physical team in the country. That's not just this year. That we've been saying that about the Wildcats for the last 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 years, since Bob Huggins took over that program and then passed the torch on to Frank Martin. That's what the foundation of their program is all about. Is they get up and guard you aggressively. They make you uncomfortable. Missouri traditionally has not reacted that well to that. Not just against the Wildcats, but Texas A&M the last few years has kind of played the same style against them and had a lot of success until this season. So I think it's just from that standpoint, it's a bad matchup. They're a bigger team. They're an aggressive rebounding team, a very good offensive rebounding team. And Missouri actually did a pretty good job of limiting their offensive rebounds last night. But it just, for whatever reason, some teams don't fit the way you play. And in this case, I just don't think this is a team that Missouri ever gets comfortable against. We've seen that Missouri has beaten them in Columbia before, but I think Kansas State's really coming on now after winning at Baylor. I think that was a big confidence boost for them, and obviously played kind of the same game, at least for the first 25 minutes or so, that they played when the two teams met them over a month ago in Manhattan.
I think there was a few other things, too. Number one, they had a good shot blocker, Enriquez, and that hurts Missouri. They have the guards that like to get to the basket, and he, I think, got in their heads pretty good in the first half, blocked 4 shots, and that really changed things up. So that's part of it, and that allows them to play more aggressively on the perimeter, because if the guy gets by you, then you've got that eraser back there. That's one of the things. I think one of the other things is Kansas State did not fall in the trap that a lot of teams that play Missouri did, in that, well, Missouri's small, so we're going to try to go small to match them. I think we're sticking with our big guys, and we're going to try to exploit. It's been weird. We all thought Missouri's size was going to be such a hindrance, and it seems like everybody else sort of plays down to their level height-wise. They're so worried about giving up easy baskets, I think, they don't exploit their own size. So that's another thing. The other thing I thought was, especially early in the game, was we haven't seen a lot of teams run on Missouri, but they did, and they did it effectively. Missouri's got point guards that are constantly attacking the basket, so you can beat them back down court, or at least you could last night. And Kansas State did that well. Kansas State's not a good half-court offense, so any easy, quick baskets they can get is advantageous to them, and I thought they did a fantastic job of that. Even after makes, just taking the ball in the net, throwing it down the court, and getting some easy hoops that way.
And I think if you look as far as the point about them playing big, I think Jamar Samuels' athleticism allows them to do that easier than some other teams. And that was not as big a liability for them to have a bigger guy who had to kind of follow Kim English around. And I thought he did a pretty good job of and obviously Kim got into some foul trouble too, which limited his effectiveness.
And then they had the big bruiser, Thomas Gibson, who I think will give Missouri more trouble than even a guy who's a far better prospect or player like Perry Jones, just because he's going to back you up until you stop him, and they didn't. I mean,
and that's where you see the physicality really come into play a lot. Is Missouri doesn't hold its ground against a guy like that in the post the way that they certainly needed to. And he had 13 points off the bench. I think it was only the 3rd time he's scored in double figures in a Big 12 game, but he did it at the right time.
So I don't know. The point I tried to make in the column I wrote for today was, Kansas State does kind of have the blueprint to give Missouri trouble, but I don't know how many other teams have the personnel or the style to really make that worth their while. I mean, Frank Martin he must just spend all of October, November, December, and January working on defense, because you'll watch them play games early in the year, and it's just like it's the most god-awful offense you've ever seen. But in February, the guy just wins. I think it's finally the offense kind of eventually gets enough work in to where they're competent, and the defense is great. He's like 27-10 in his career in February. You're playing nothing but conference games to be 27-10. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and he even kind of made the point last night. They hammer away at the defensive end for the first 3 months of the season until they get it right, and then they start really working on the offense. And I think repetition through the course of games has helped, but I think they're spending more time on that now than they probably did in October. And I also think you saw that Kansas State has one legitimate go-to player in Rodney Magruder, and he hit 2 huge shots in a row after Missouri had pulled within 3 and was making its run. And he showed a lot of poise and a lot of calm. And I wasn't sure that this Kansas State team had that after losing Jacob Pullen, but I thought those were as important as any 2 shots in the game.
All right, well, this is the Kansas State webcast, so we'll move on to more Missouri. How does last night's loss affect their chances of getting a number 1 seed? They obviously have Kansas game coming up on Saturday. I think a lot of people see that as the winner probably has the inside track to the number 1 seed, but it's still, I guess, possible they could both get number 1 seeds.
I think that a lot's still to be decided because Saturday might not be the last time these 2 teams play. Obviously, Kansas City and the Big 12 tournament is still a possibility. I think they're both solidly in the mix for number 1 or 2 seeds. And I spoke with Jerry Palm earlier today, and he still thinks that Missouri, even with the loss to Kansas State, would probably be a 1 seed, just because they do only have 3 losses, and they've got a lot of quality wins, certainly beating Baylor twice, beating Kansas once already. That said, you lose on Saturday and don't finish as strongly as Frank Haith would like, they could easily bump down a line. I don't think they're in any danger of falling below a 2 unless they completely collapse. So, but a lot's still out there, and people will quickly forget about the Kansas State result if they go into Allen Fieldhouse and win for the first time since 1999.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people, I think, have maybe Duke as the 4th number 1 seed, along with whoever's in the Big 12, Syracuse, Kentucky, although Michigan State's coming up hard from the rear, too. They're another team that could slip in there. So, like you said, I don't think there's any way Missouri drops below the number 2 line. So it's probably just a matter of you're not going to be paired up. If Missouri's a 2, they won't be paired up in the same bracket as Kansas. And so I think you also want to avoid being in the one with Kentucky because, to me, they're the most obvious. They seem to be head and shoulders ahead of everyone.
I absolutely agree with that, and I think this battle in the Big 12 that we're seeing isn't the only place this is happening. You've also got North Carolina that still has a chance to, take Duke's spot. Ohio State and Michigan State are still battling out in the Big 10. I think people feel pretty confident that Kentucky and Syracuse are going to be 1 seeds at this point, but I think those other 2, you've got 6 teams really, really duking it out, and those teams are going to play each other at least once and maybe a couple times.
Okay, the last time Missouri and Kansas met, Missouri wins 74-71 in a thriller. In that game, Tyshawn Taylor kind of got loose on Missouri and went crazy in the first half. Second half, Thomas Robinson did likewise, and it kind of took a monster effort, especially by Marcus Denman, for Missouri to win the game. How do you see the game playing out this time? What differences maybe you think from what we saw in Columbia?
Well, I think Missouri was really able to limit Thomas Robinson in the first half. And I think they are going to need to hope that can happen again, but certainly do a better job against him in the second half. He really took over, and I think he had 19 of his 25 points in the second half. And
they really weren't doubling him much either. I mean, they were just kind of letting.
And a couple of times when they did, he made them pay. He hit Connor Tehan for an open 3 in the corner when Missouri kind of sagged off. He's a dangerous guy because he is able to make those plays. Missouri was trying not to do that as much as possible when they surrounded him with the shooters that they did. He's just a load. I mean, there's no question he's going to be a first-team All-American, and there's a reason for that. They're going to need to just hope that they can contain him to, something closer to his scoring average rather than the 25 he got here. They need another quiet game from Jeff Withey. I think that was a huge factor in the outcome. He gets 1 shot, doesn't score. He's been on a tear since then. He wasn't as good against Texas Tech, but didn't need to be on Saturday. But he'd had a 20-rebound game. He scored 25 points against Baylor. he's a 7-footer who can really alter the game as a shot blocker. We talked about Jordan Henriquez, but Withy's really been the best shot blocker in the league this year. They're going to need to figure out a way to do the same thing that they did in Columbia to have a shot.
Obviously, you'd like to try to draw him out of the middle so you can drive the lane, but if not, if he's in there, you obviously maybe need to pull up more than take it all the way to the rim, because I don't think Missouri's going to be able to finish over that guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's blocking over 3 shots a game, and he's not Anthony Davis at Kentucky, but he's one of the better shot blockers in the country, and another guy who allows Kansas to be as aggressive as they are on the perimeter when they're guarding people.
All right, well, should be interesting. Join us again next week when we'll discuss that Kansas game and look forward to the Big 12 tournament.